In the heart of the dark forest of a vast English national park, where the trees whisper ancient secrets and the paths weave into impenetrable mazes, a 7-year-old girl disappeared without a trace. But when all human eyes were lost in the darkness of the night, a horse, with the loyalty of a hero without a cape, decided he would not leave his friend alone in the solitude of the forest. What no one knew was that night, the true strength of the bond between human and animal would be tested in a way that would challenge even the limits of the impossible. Emily had always loved the forest. Since she was little, she felt an almost magical connection with the twisted branches and dense bushes that formed the tangled web of the English woodland. She knew every corner of the national park, every curve of the rivers that slithered silently between the trees, and every trail marked by her small hiking boots. But that afternoon, a combination of distraction and curiosity led the girl to wander further than usual. Duke, her horse, had always been her faithful companion. Strong, imposing, and with an intelligence that seemed to surpass that of many humans, the animal was always by her side, taking care of Emily as if he knew her life was somehow connected to his. But that afternoon, Duke couldn't follow Emily, who, moved by the cool breeze and the promise of a new discovery, ventured deeper into the forest than ever before. As the sky began to darken, Emily realized that time had passed quicker than she had imagined. The trees around her now seemed taller, and the path, once clear, now stretched out in several directions. She looked behind her, but Duke was no longer there. Desperate, she tried to retrace her steps, but the branches and leaves began to look the same. Every direction seemed to be the wrong way. The forest, once welcoming, now felt like a prison of shadows. The daylight faded quickly, and the girl began to hear the sounds of the night, the rustling of leaves, the distant echo of a crow, the wind howling through the trees. But what terrified her most was not the growing darkness, but the absolute silence of her own voice. Emily tried to scream, but her throat felt tight with fear. Duke, she called, her eyes filling with tears, but the only sound that responded was her own echo. Meanwhile, in a small village on the edge of the park, anguish took hold of Emily's parents. Their hearts raced as the sun set, and the news of the girl's disappearance spread quickly. Friends and neighbors gathered in a desperate effort to find her, with lanterns and flashlights cutting through the darkness of the forest. But even as the search teams split into groups and traversed the familiar trails, fear gripped them. The forest, with its thick shadows and deep silence, seemed to swallow the girl whole, as though she had never existed. However, there was something else in the forest that night. Something that even the humans could not understand. Duke, the horse, had noticed his friend's absence. While the men and women searched for Emily in futile directions, Duke, with his innate intuition, felt that something was wrong. He would not rest until he found her. Night fell over the national park with the speed of an impenetrable shadow. The sky, now covered by a thick layer of clouds, seemed to hide even the last star, as if the universe itself had withheld the hope that Emily would be found. The lanterns of the searchers flickered between the branches and bushes, but the darkness of the forest seemed to swallow everything, distorting the view and making each step more difficult than the last. The uneven ground, with its treacherous roots and tangled trails, offered no respite. The heavy silence of the night only amplified the sound of the labored breaths of the men and women searching for Emily. With every step, fear grew, and with it, frustration. "She has to be around here," murmured the search leader, his face marked with worry. But where, exactly? They had covered miles, calling her name, stretching lanterns towards every tree, every bush, but nothing. No signs of Emily, no clue that could lead to her whereabouts. Time, relentless, pressed on. The girl had been alone in the forest for hours, and the cold night wind felt like a grim warning. The fear that it might be too late began to seep into the minds of the rescuers, but no one dared to give up. Not yet. Meanwhile, as the men split up, Duke was far away, already lost in the forest's winding paths. The horse, with his hooves pounding the ground, moved through the bushes and clearings with impressive agility, ignoring the treacherous terrain that hindered any other living being. He didn't stop, he didn't falter. His eyes were fixed on the darkness ahead, and his heart beat with one single purpose: to find Emily. He ran as if the forest itself had called him, feeling the pressure of time without being discouraged. With every step, the biting wind seemed to only increase his determination. It was no longer about saving a lost girl. It was a deep bond, an instinct that told him he must find her, that he was the only one capable of bringing her back to safety. He didn't know exactly how, but he knew his journey would not be in vain. As the rescuers focused on specific areas, Duke followed his own path, straying from the familiar trails and delving deeper into the densest part of the forest. Further and further from the coordinated search, he seemed to understand that Emily wasn't in any of the places they had searched. She was beyond the lights and the human voices, somewhere only the animals could go. The forest, in its vastness, seemed to open up to him like an old friend, and Duke knew it as well as he knew his own shadow. He ran, trusting in something deeper than just the search. He trusted the bond with Emily, a connection that transcended human understanding. The forest was not a barrier for him, but a road. And there, in the winding vegetation, Duke knew she was near. As the human search continued, unsuccessfully, the horse pressed on. His loyalty to Emily guided every movement, and a strange sense of certainty filled his chest. He knew she was there, waiting for him. And he would do whatever it took to find her. Deep in his soul, Duke understood what humans couldn't, that sometimes, the strength of a true bond can transcend all limitations of time and space. He would not stop until she was safe again. The forest, shrouded in darkness and silence, seemed like a labyrinth of endless shadows. The tall, dense trees blocked any trace of light, and the biting wind whispered through the branches with an almost spectral tone. Duke, massive and fearless, advanced without hesitation, his hooves echoing on the damp earth as he ventured deeper. He needed no maps or paths. His mission was clear, and his bond with Emily stronger than any obstacle. His loyalty was the only compass he followed. The horse moved along winding trails, some nearly invisible, covered by a thick layer of leaves and roots that would stop any other animal. But not Duke. He never faltered. He knew exactly what he was looking for and, more importantly, he knew where Emily was. Something within him, a deep and inexplicable instinct, guided his steps with unexplainable precision. The wind howled in his ears, but Duke pressed on, his senses sharpened, searching for any sign of the girl he had promised to save. Then, amidst the forest silence, he heard it. A faint sound, almost drowned out by the wind, but unmistakable. It was a cry, the sound of someone in distress. He stopped abruptly, his muscles tense, eyes fixed on the dark horizon. The sound came from afar, but to Duke, distance meant nothing. He knew he was close. He started moving faster, heading towards that voice calling for help, unsure of what he would find. As Duke advanced, Emily, the girl he loved with all the loyalty a horse could offer, was isolated in the vastness of the forest. She was curled under a large tree, her body trembling with cold and fear. Her eyes, red from crying, gazed at the starless sky, and the solitude wrapped around her like a heavy cloak. She didn't know how long she had been there, lost and vulnerable, but something within her remained strong. Her hope hadn't died. Not completely. She remembered her father's words, often spoken when she was young, as a comfort in times of fear. Horses are the most loyal animals, Emily. They will never abandon you, no matter what happens. These words echoed in her mind, repeated like a mantra, as she huddled against the tree, trying to find some shelter from the cold and darkness. It was an inexplicable calm, a sense that something was about to happen. Even amid her distress, she felt Duke was near. She just had to believe. The wind carried a sound, a presence. She felt it before she saw it. The sound of hooves hitting the ground, strong and steady, like a drumbeat, sliced through the stillness of the night. Duke, with the strength and determination only he possessed, emerged into the clearing before her. His eyes were fixed on her, glowing in the dark, reflecting an expression of pure loyalty and trust. He approached calmly, as though knowing she was on the edge of despair, and somehow, he had come to restore the hope she still carried in her heart. Emily, tears still streaming, looked at Duke with misty eyes. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. Her breath, which had been ragged, slowed as she realized he was there, right in front of her. The horse, with his mane in the wind and his muscular body reflecting the little light left in the night, seemed like the very embodiment of salvation. With a trembling sigh, she reached out and gently touched Duke's mane. It was the contact she needed. She was no longer alone. "Duke," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "You came." The horse lowered his head, as if understanding every word, and with a soft neigh, he knelt, allowing Emily to approach. His eyes were fixed on her, as if silently saying that everything would be all right. She carefully moved closer, climbing into the saddle and clinging to him with all the strength she had left. She was weak, but with Duke there, by her side, she felt hope return. The forest, which had once seemed a hostile place, now seemed a little less frightening. With Duke as her guide, Emily knew she was safe. They would leave there, together. The horse, with his unwavering loyalty, had fulfilled his promise. He had found his owner, even in the darkest shadows of the forest, and now, together, they would face whatever still lay ahead. The wind sliced through the dark forest, and Emily, with tired eyes, struggled to stay awake. Her feet ached and were bruised from the long walk and the sharp stones she had encountered along the way. Hunger tightened her stomach, but the fear of not finding help was even more tormenting. She had hidden beneath a tree, her makeshift shelter, trying to regain her strength, but the shadows seemed to creep across the land, making everything even more oppressive. It was then, amidst the heavy silence of the night, that she heard a distant sound, a neigh. The sound, soft and reassuring, cut through the darkness like a sharp blade. Emily opened her eyes, not believing what she was hearing. She froze for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. It couldn't be. It couldn't be what she thought. But as the sound grew closer, she realized. It was him. It was Duke. The horse, his mane waving in the wind, emerged from the shadows, his strong and imposing body breaking through the forest's darkness. His eyes, shining like two headlights, locked onto Emily. He was here, in front of her, once again. The energy he exuded felt almost tangible, a vital force that calmed the turmoil in her spirit. Emily, with a surge of relief, tried to rise, but her legs gave way. She could barely keep her eyes open, her body exhausted from the effort. But the sight of Duke made the impossible seem possible. Her lips, trembling, formed a smile, weak, but sincere. He had come. Duke approached slowly, his hooves silent on the ground. When he was close enough, he stopped, his gaze fixed on the girl as if waiting for an action from her. Emily stretched out her hand with effort, and upon touching him, the connection that had always existed between them was renewed, like an invisible chain linking her to the horse since the first day she had met him. She didn't know how, but she felt that with him by her side, everything would be all right. Her horse, always protective, always reliable, was here to save her, as he had always done. She clung to him with an unexpected strength, her tears mingling with the dirt on her face. Longing and fear finally gave way to relief. Duke, for his part, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. There was no hesitation in his movements. He lowered his body slightly, as though inviting Emily to climb onto his back. She knew that the only way out of there was with him. It was with Duke that she would find the way back to safety. With difficulty, she lifted a leg and, with immense effort, managed to settle on the horse's back. Her muscles ached, and weakness overtook her, but Duke's presence made her feel stronger. He was there to guide her. This was the final test of his loyalty, a loyalty that went beyond any limits. Without looking back, Duke began to walk with firm, decisive steps. Each step seemed to calculate the future, as though he knew that the path ahead was still full of dangers. But Duke did not waver. He knew what to do, he knew where to go. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the gentle movement of the horse beneath her. The sound of the hooves resonated through the dark, a constant rhythm that rocked her. She no longer needed to search. Duke would find her, as he always had. The way back was about to be taken, and with it, renewed hope. While the forest remained a labyrinth of shadows, Emily knew that her journey was not alone. She was with Duke. And that, more than anything else, was all she needed to believe that salvation was within her grasp. The night seemed endless, but with each step Duke took, the darkness became less oppressive. He followed narrow, winding trails, with Emily on his back, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. The wind seemed to calm, as if nature itself understood the urgency of the moment. The horse moved forward without hesitation, each step firmer than the last. And as the forest began to open up, a distant sound began to seep into the silence, the sound of hooves striking the ground. The rescuers, exhausted and nearly hopeless, were at a small meeting point on the edge of the forest. Their lanterns illuminated the shadows of the night, but the sense of frustration was palpable. There was no more time. Morning was already approaching, and the search seemed to have reached a standstill. But then, a wave of curiosity swept over the group. The sound of the hooves, soft at first but growing louder, made everyone turn towards the source of the noise. For a moment, no one moved, they just looked at each other, uncertain. Then, as they rounded a bend in the trail, Duke appeared. The horse, with his golden mane blowing in the wind, emerged like a vision of relief in the dark. But what truly shocked them was the presence of Emily, fragile and exhausted, but alive, her tired eyes and weak smile revealing that she had finally found hope. The rescuers froze, unable to believe what they were seeing. How was it possible that the horse had found the girl? Duke, with the silent wisdom of a creature that understands more than words can express, moved towards the men and women waiting, bringing not just the child, but the promise that, however impossible it seemed, miracles could still happen. He stopped in front of the rescuers, as if he knew his mission was complete. Emily, with tear-filled eyes, dismounted with difficulty, and without hesitation, surrendered herself to the welcoming arms of the rescuers. "She's alive," one of the rescuers shouted, and a cry of relief spread through the group. Tight embraces, smiles on tired faces, and a collective sigh of gratitude filled the air. Emily was safe, but the miracle of her recovery was not the only thought on the minds of those there. The story of Duke, the horse who defied all odds, soon spread like wildfire through the community. In the days that followed, local newspapers began to report the incredible loyalty of the animal, who, with his instinct and courage, guided his owner to safety. Many could not understand how this had happened, but for those who had witnessed Emily's return to life, the answer was clear: Duke had been more than just a horse. He was an extension of Emily's heart, a friend, a protector, a hero. The townspeople began to look at their own animals with new eyes. Many, once skeptical, started to perceive the deep bond that united humans and animals, something that transcended logic and reason. It was an invisible connection, based on love, trust, and unconditional loyalty. Emily, now at home, with her arms wrapped around her horse, felt that the world had changed for her in ways words could not describe. She knew that Duke had not only found her in the forest, he had found her within herself, in the part of her being that had never lost hope, even when fear had taken over. She had always known there was something special between her and Duke, but now, seeing how he had become a legend, she understood that true love, just like loyalty, is never lost. And so, Duke and Emily remained together, not only as owner and animal but as partners in a story that would forever change the perception of the connection between humans and horses, a story so extraordinary that it would take on a life of its own, to be told and retold, touching hearts around the world. When Emily arrived home, her parents were waiting for her, their eyes shining with emotion and relief. They hugged her tightly, as if they never wanted to let her slip from their arms again. The house, which had once felt empty and silent, was now filled with laughter, soft words, and a sense of peace that she hadn't felt since the beginning of that dreadful night. But despite the warm welcome, Emily knew in her heart that the true heroine of the story was not her. It was Duke. While the others celebrated Emily's safety, she remained thoughtful, sitting beside Duke, who was now calm and resting in the stable. He had fulfilled his mission, but something in Emily's gaze showed that she knew something deep had changed between them. The bond they shared transcended simple understanding. She knew that Duke had never abandoned her, not even when the world seemed to fall apart. The story of Duke soon spread throughout the town and the surrounding area. Local newspapers began to cover the rescue with emotional details, highlighting the horse's loyalty and instinct. Little Emily was invited to give an interview for the local newspaper, and with the microphone in front of her, the words began to flow naturally. "He always knew where I was," Emily said, her voice soft yet firm. "I don't know how, but Duke never left me. He found me, even when it seemed there was no hope left. I wasn't alone." The reporters, moved by the sincerity of her words, couldn't help but admire the depth of the bond between the girl and the horse. They weren't just hearing a story of a rescue, they were witnessing a miracle, something beyond reason, something that spoke directly to the hearts of people. Emily's words echoed not only in the pages of the newspapers, but also in the national park where it all happened. "Duke always knew where I was. He never abandoned me." These words became a reminder that, even in the most desperate situations, hope can come from the most unexpected places, and that loyalty has no limits. The town, once quiet, now buzzed with the story of Emily and Duke. Their bond became a symbol of strength and perseverance, a reminder that, even in the darkest times, there is always a light to guide us back home. What had seemed like a simple rescue had turned into a tale of love, courage, and loyalty, touching hearts throughout the region and beyond. Emily's words began to be repeated by everyone who heard her, "Duke never abandoned me." It was a simple phrase, but one with so much weight, as it reflected something that everyone longed to understand, the power of a deep bond, a connection that nothing could break. That story, which had begun with the loss of a child in the forest, was now forever marked as an example of how the most unlikely beings can save us and teach us eternal lessons. And Duke, with his calm gaze and silent strength, remained by Emily's side, her true friend and hero. For him, there was no need for words. He knew, and she knew, that together they were stronger than any challenge the future might present. And so, their story of loyalty would continue to be told for generations, touching the hearts of all who heard it and reminding them that, often, the greatest heroes don't need a cape, they just need love. The park, now forever marked by Duke's courage, seemed even more serene, almost reverent. In the place where the rescue story had begun, a plaque was placed with words that immortalized the name of the heroic horse. Duke, the horse who never abandoned. The recognition was more than deserved, not only for the bravery shown, but for the unwavering loyalty that had guided young Emily back to safety. The event was celebrated by the community, with children and adults gathering to pay tribute to the horse who had become a symbol of courage. For the townspeople, Duke's story was not just about a rescue. It was about faith, about the unbreakable trust between a human and an animal, and how this bond could transcend the boundaries of what was thought possible. Every step Duke took through the forest had been a silent affirmation that true loyalty is, indeed, indestructible. But for Emily, the true tribute was given silently, in every glance exchanged with Duke. They remained inseparable, more than ever. The young girl never ventured into the forests without him again. Together, they formed an unbeatable pair, an unbreakable duo, united not only by friendship but by a loyalty that had been forged in the darkest of hours. Every step she took beside him felt safer, stronger, more confident. And the story of Duke echoed far beyond the town, spreading to other regions and even abroad, inspiring those who heard it to reflect on the power of the bonds between humans and animals. In Duke's eyes, everyone saw not just the figure of a horse, but the manifestation of a pure and simple feeling, loyalty. As he walked through the park, Duke always had a calm gaze, as if he knew the impact he had made on the world around him. Years passed, but the story was never forgotten. Emily grew, but the bond between her and Duke remained unbreakable. They continued to share moments together, with each adventure further strengthening the connection they had created. The girl, now older, still sat beside Duke on quiet afternoons, the two of them watching the field where it all had begun. The green field seemed even more vast, and in some way, more meaningful. With every step Duke took, there was the reminder of the miracle he had performed. The field had now become a symbol, not just of a rescue, but of the pure essence of an eternal bond. In a moment of quiet, Emily, now an adult, looked out to the horizon where she and Duke had shared so many adventures. The sun gently set, painting the sky with golden and pink hues. Beside her, Duke, his mane swaying softly in the breeze, remained firm and strong, as always. They had lived through so much together, and there was still so much ahead. But on that peaceful afternoon, it was as if time had stood still, allowing Emily to reflect on their journey. The world had changed, but the love between her and Duke had not. He was there, with his eternal loyalty, always by her side. And Emily knew that, as long as she was with him, there would be no fear. After all, she and Duke had become more than just a girl and a horse. They were the personification of trust, friendship, courage, an example to all who understood that, sometimes, the strongest bond is the one that cannot be explained, but lives in the heart. As the field stretched out before her, Emily felt a warmth in her chest. She knew, deep down, that she had never been saved by a mere horse. She had been saved by Duke, by his faithful heart, his courage, his loyalty that had never wavered. And so, with her gaze fixed on the field and her horse by her side, Emily smiled. They were more than heroes. They were, above all, a story of eternal loyalty. Would you believe that a horse can save a life? The story of Duke and Emily will move you and make you rethink the true strength of the bonds between humans and animals. If you have ever been touched by such unwavering loyalty, share it with your friends and spread this message of courage. Comment eternal loyalty if you believe that true friendship can change everything.